Welcome to One for the Money, the weekly talk show with interviews you can use. I'm national financial columnist and talk show host, Steve Savant. And on today's show, simple and straightforward retirement income. We all know we need to save more money for retirement, but so many retirement plans seem so complicated and hard to understand. Most Americans just want something simple and straightforward, a plan that'll help them get from here to where they need to be. So to help us get on track for retirement and give us a simple track to run on that'll help us get from here to where we need to be, this week's special guest, Jonathan Illig, income architect and the simple straightforward retirement plan, all here on One for the Money. Well, welcome to the show, John.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
John, everybody that's watching our television show is always asking me the same thing. Well, Steve, I know I should be saving money for retirement. Our whole show is built on finding other ways to save you money so that I can park money in retirement. But when you talk about retirement, it seems so complicated today. It seems sophisticated. And a lot of Americans really have pretty straightforward, retirement ideas. Social Security, we know some format, hopefully it's going to be there, right? When we don't know what the degree, but really for the baby boomers, and right now they're discussing the demarcation line on Social Security is going to be about anybody 55 and up is probably going to be left alone. Anybody below that demarcation line is probably going to have to look at a different format and a different design for Social Security. So most people 55 and older are looking at Social Security. Now, the reason I have John on today is because John is an income expert and a major designer in the United States, and even has a software that professionals use in their practice to really design retirement modeling. Now, when I talk about it, I want a basic, we're talking about basic retirement income. Tell me a little bit about what I need to look at. I'm just a normal American. I want to put money aside. What am I looking at?
Well, I believe in a process, Steve, where for the typical normal American, when they're going to retire, they need to look at their retirement income really in two separate income streams, each of which has a different purpose. The first one we call foundation income, and just as it sounds, it's simply adding up the amount of income you're going to need to provide for your basic needs during retirement.
Now does a consumer, do we have to then figure out, we have to figure out what we are going to have to spend?
Absolutely.
So we're going to have to do a budget.
Absolutely.
And it's going to have to be a retirement budget, not the way we're using today while we're earning, but a budget that we're going to need when we retire.
Absolutely, and we split that budget between two different types of income needs, Steve. One, again, we call the foundation, the other we call discretionary. Really simple difference between the two. How much income or expenses am I going to have to meet my basic needs? How much is my fund money? It's really quite that simple. We call one foundation income in the planning process, the other discretionary income. The two combined are your total retirement income.
Well, I'm thinking, I don't know if everybody's going to have a house payment by the time they're hit retirement. Hopefully no.
Hopefully no.
Hopefully no. But they're going to look at utilities, the house payment if it's there, car, insurance, plates, my food, my clothing, all these allowances. I have to really, I think a lot of times we enter into our senior years and we're not prepped to go from our earning years to our retirement years, and we have to do a completely revamp, a complete budget again.
Quite often we do, because it actually goes a little bit farther than that, Steve, because when we look at the retirement income planning process and we do extensive forecasting and things like that, not only that, but we have to look at what changes in those spending or might have to occur. My favorite example, you just mentioned it, a lot of people, especially our boomers these days, are retiring with mortgages in place. Well, a key part of even looking at how much retirement income ultimately you're going to need as well as want is, when will that mortgage be paid off? Because that's typically a big section of the total retirement income need. So we want to put things like that into the total plan so that we can get the best possible forecast for the consumer that we possibly can.
Now, I know a lot of people are going to be carrying mortgages into their retirement. There's no doubt about that, and that's a major expense to be sure. And some of them are starting to pay bi-monthly or bi-weekly so that they can actually maybe chop off maybe 6-7 years at the end of their mortgage, at least accelerate it a little bit without injuring or kind of messing with their cash flow. Now, for people who have this issue, when I'm looking at modeling, is this going to change the way they attack because a mortgage is a major piece of the pie, and Social Security, even if that's a piece of that, I don't know that's going to really be able to be covering that.
No, typically it isn't. So the process that we go to, particularly on what we call the foundation income, or easier way to put it is just the needs, is Social Security, pensions if they're lucky enough to have one still, and what we call other secure income sources are the first thing we look at to fill, if you will, that basic foundation income need. In most cases, Social Security, even when we have two benefits coming in a married couple, is typically not enough to fill that entire foundation income need. And so that's when we start looking at how do we best use their retirement savings assets to fill the rest of what we call the foundation income gap, which is simply the difference between what is Social Security, again, pension if they're lucky enough to have one, how much does that fill, and the difference between that and what they must have to remain comfortable. We call that the gap, and that's the first thing we attack in the retirement income planning process.
Well, John, you just said that they're lucky to have it. I mean, is your experience showing you that a lot of Americans don't have anything but Social Security?
Quite a bit, quite a bit. We're still seeing it all over the map, but it's very, very common for people to just have Social Security and their retirement savings, whether that's IRAs, 401ks, or whatever it is. And those pensions that we do see, Steve, tend to be fairly small, and in my experience, it's typically a pension. I might call it a legacy pension. It's typically from something they did earlier in their career, and they're still able to activate it once they retire. And even more disturbing, most of those pensions that certainly I see don't even have a cost of living increase attached to them. It's just going to be a flat amount.
In your modeling, you put inflation in this.
Absolutely. In fact, we attack inflation in a slightly different way, or perhaps fundamentally different way than a lot of people do. It's been my experience that a lot of people, when they're trying to figure out that inflation piece, they quite often are perhaps overstating it. And let me just talk about that for a moment.
When we come back, we're going to talk about all this because inflation is a big piece of the pie, and if you're not including this in your retirement plan, that's a big mistake. So we have to modify the way we think about inflation, cost of living. I call it the real cost of living. When we come back from the break, we'll talk all about that.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
Living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back to our second segment, two for the show, and of course we're with income architect, expert, and aficionado, I have to say, and John Illig. John, we're talking, when we hit the break, we're talking about inflation. Now here's one thing, it's a major gripe with me. I'll try not to get on my bandwagon here, but the government puts out an inflation number, and they tie it to Social Security and other things. But I have found that the real cost of living isn't inflation, it's more, and some of the things that are in my true cost of living aren't incorporated into the inflation. What's with that?
Absolutely. One of the key ones is energy. They throw out energy, and I think a lot of the different types of food costs. They do it because you just hit it on the head. Inflation increases or COLA increases to things like Social Security, but a host of other government benefits as well are tied to that inflation rate. And so I personally believe that's the reason they don't count those things. The economists or the government economists will give us a lot of, I don't know, gobbledygook, if you will, about why they actually do it. I think it's to keep that rate down.
Well, I think the hard cost, I mean, we keep track of inflation. I have charts on this going way back, and I'm talking very far back. But I also keep cost of living and the loss of consumer purchasing power. Because to me, that's the issue, and especially when you're heading to retirement. I mean, this is a major issue to consider. So when we're talking about, as you said in the first segment, foundation, we're doing all our foundation. I'm trying to figure out what are my utility bills going to be, and it's hard to say, what are my utility bills going to be in 20 years? What is my food price? What's the gasoline going to be? I mean, hopefully, we're into shale and doing all these things. We have all this abundant energy in the United States. I hope we get to tap it. So when I'm looking at my foundation, my basic commodities, my needs.
Right.
I want to be able to price that out, figure out what I'm going to need, and then one big thing that consumers don't do, and I find this a shock, is to figure out what I think is going to be my life expectancy, which, by the way, shockingly enough, we can actually calculate that now. Get in the game. It's a good estimation. It's not a pure science, of course.
Yeah.
But it gets us in the game. Now, when we talk about foundations and we have all this done, my goodness, we might have a little above the line. We might have a little cash flow. We might have a little discretionary income.
Absolutely.
Why do you bring this up? Because I would have thought you would have just stayed on the budget. Here's what we have. Whatever is above the line, we'll just go ahead and do that. But people need to know, do I need to develop like an emergency fund during retirement? Do I still need to park money for my Medicare, my medicine? Will I have different health categories that I need to park money on?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, always you need an emergency fund, whether that's pre-retirement or post-retirement. I mean, that's just a given. What we do in our planning process is we look at the medical expenses, or at least what we think the medical expenses are going to be. And again, you can't completely predict the future. We inflate those at a higher rate of inflation, for example, than perhaps we might inflate other things. And one of the key things when we look at this inflation thing in general, and I want really the people out there to really understand this, when you're trying to figure out this foundational income you're going to need, don't inflate things that don't inflate. For example, if you have a fixed rate mortgage, don't assign a 3 or 4% inflation rate to that. It's not going to go up if it's fixed rate, but that would really skew your numbers if you did that. It would.
I can totally see that, what you just said right now. And I think people go, they take their total budget, they list it, and then they put the number on it.
That's
4% inflation. That's a mistake.
That's exactly what they do. They're not looking at what we call changes to those expenses. Again, sooner or later that mortgage is going to be paid off, we hope. But even at that, if it's a major portion of the budget and it's not going to inflate, but you inflate it, it skews your numbers and it looks scarier than it is. Versus some things inflate more than others. We typically like to look at inflating energy costs 4 or 5% a year, certainly medical costs. But other things don't inflate at quite that high a level. So inflation, while there's certainly nothing wrong with assigning a given 3% or whatever it is might be in running it all out, you've really got to look at it in a little bit more depth and look at what's going to change or what potentially might change throughout the course of my retirement. One other really good example of that, Steve, is that most people when they retire, at least a lot of them, they want to do some traveling and stuff. I mean, that's what we're all trying to do here, have a nice life in retirement. But the fact of the matter is what happens with most people is as they get significantly older, they start to scale back on that, if for no other reason because physically it's more difficult for them. We want to take that into account when we're doing the entire retirement income forecast because, again, it has the effect of lowering, especially at the far end of retirement, what that overall income need might be, and therefore getting it more into the reality of what potentially could be,
So if I understand you correctly, the discretionary income, there's going to be, everybody, I want to travel, I want to see my grandkids, I want to go out and do things. That's why we're retiring, to really do things we've never been able to have time for.
Golf club membership.
I'm there. Now, but you're saying, if I'm hearing correctly, it's going to start scaling down at certain ages.
We typically see that.
And we want to be able to incorporate that scale down or that less spending in discretion.
Absolutely, into the total plan, because it makes a huge difference in what the total amount of income over time that you're going to have to generate off those retirement savings assets. It makes a huge difference.
Now I'm thinking about, when we're talking about this, I think people that are 55 and older, they get this, their retirement is on the horizon, they actually see this coming. But when you're younger, and you have so many other things, you want to buy your first home, you want to do this, there's a lot of things that we haven't taken into consideration. And when I come back on our third segment, I want to prep our young people and address them a little bit about, hey, this is what you need to do, and learn from our mistakes as boomers, especially after 2008. So when we come back, we're going to talk about some of this because we want to make sure we touch all generations and not just talk about our geriatrics or the boomers, because we want to make sure everybody gets addressed in the show. Retirement is huge, and we're all going to be living longer. It's time to start thinking this way, and we have the tools and the skill sets to make it happen.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
Living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back. We're with John Illig, income designer extraordinaire. We're talking about retirement, and when we hit the break, we were talking about most of it. We were talking about from our 55 and older.
Absolutely.
But young people, I think about when you and I back in the day. I mean, John, think about this. If we knew what we knew today, back then, would you have modified your behavior?
Oh, absolutely. I think modify might be too small a word, Steve.
I was trying to be diplomatic, you know.
Yeah, very diplomatic. Absolutely. Knowing what I know today, when I go back to when I was certainly in my late 20s and absolutely when I was in my 30s, I would have modified just a tremendous amount of things that I was doing financially at that point.
Well, let's talk about that. If you had to go back today in time, what are some of the things that you'd touch and address as a young person in their 30s?
Well, it really comes down to savings, savings, savings. As I think most of us are aware, and probably even the young people out there listening, the earlier you start seriously saving for retirement, the easier it's going to be, the more you're going to have, and frankly, the less you're going to have to put away at your later years. And what we find is a lot of folks our age right now, I'm in my early 50s, are having to put away now in order to be prepared fairly significant amounts of money.
Right.
And what you're really doing there is you're making up for what you didn't do in your 30s and your 40s. So yeah, I absolutely would have modified a whole lot of things differently. And I would have also really looked at some of the things such as, frankly, permanent life insurance as a means of saving for retirement.
Oh, that's strange.
That I really didn't look at or frankly was even aware of back then when I was in my 30s.
Yeah, there's some really new technology in life insurance, especially in indexing, that I've noticed that people are starting to look at, and as not only a supplement to 401ks and IRAs, but maybe even their actual plan. When I'm thinking about a young person today, parking money aside, and boy, you just said something to me that just is a scary thought. It is true. Most of the boomers that are 55 and older are putting huge amounts of money aside now. They've had to gear down their lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
If a young person actually saw this, learned from our mistakes, and they could actually incorporate a system, which we have, and this is why I want to bring this up. We have a complete system. You say, Steve, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. Well, we have great data collectors for you. We can fill out the information, and we can actually do not only budgeting, but actually forward-thinking forecasting that can really help you understand this. And if I'm under 55 today, and I'm hearing two boomers say, if we had to do it all over again, wouldn't you like to learn from our mistakes, right? I mean, this is the time to do it. Now, when I think about it, here's another thing, because you've split your basic thinking into foundation and discretionary. So when I'm thinking about that, I say, well, I want a lot of discretionary.
Most people do.
So if I'm a young person, I have to start thinking, hey, if I want to do things, and think about this, our young people are going to be living. Any healthy, exercising person, I cannot believe the females of Gen X and Gen Y are not going to be seeing 90 all day long.
I think everything I've ever read is indicating that, absolutely.
So, I mean, we have to start thinking about it. And I like discretionary income. So we have to start planning, what are we going to do that we really want to do in retirement? And as we head for that, we need to start thinking, I have foundational issues, I have budgetary issues, but I also have things I want to get done here.
Absolutely.
So for our young people, I'm just thinking, give me another thing you think that a young person could do today to set their foot on a good footing, just to make their first step towards retirement.
Oh, I'm going to go right back to what I said before. Savings, savings,
Well, how
savings.
much is a good, how much is that?
Well, you know, it's going to vary.
10% of my budget?
I would say at least 10%.
So
A minimum
of my
10.
net, my take home.
I would say 10% of your gross.
Oh my goodness.
Which is a lot tougher to do.
It is
a lot
tougher
tougher
to
to do. But I've found that talking to a lot of people who did it right, so to speak, that was the rule they kind of went by.
Now, most of the people, if they're going to do that, that's a chunk of change
big
for a
chunk
lot
of
of people.
It's a big chunk.
Let's talk about that, because to me, that means they're going to be doing it on a monthly basis. I've done all
typically.
my expenses and whatever I have left, and then I'm going to try to hit this number. Why I'm trying to hit this number and really deliver some consistent savings, there's this old theory that we all heard about, maybe it's new to our listeners, dollar cost averaging. I mean, we're just putting it in, and we want to be able to put in and get some growth in the market. So there's going to be some monies are going to be tied to the market to get more equity
Typically,
push.
sure.
There's going to be more conservative, so we have a guaranteed. There's going to be sections that are going to be guaranteed. When we're putting aside that money on a monthly basis, because that's where a lot of people are at, they don't have the kind of lump sum to do this.
How most people are.
Right. So if they do that, I'm thinking, you know, like, because we're coming up on unqualified plan season here pretty soon. IRAs are going to be a big one. If you're not in a 401k or you have a pension, I mean, that'd be one example. Is there any other examples I should look at besides an IRA?
Well, again, I think that what we call non-qualified money is always a way to go. Once you max out what you can do in what we call tax-qualified money, 401ks, IRAs, things of that nature, then you want to look at how can I save for non-qualified money. As I alluded to a few minutes ago, the certain forms of permanent life insurance are an excellent way to save for retirement. And one of the things I would say that we were speaking of there, or what I was thinking of when you were talking, Steve, was this. You want to start with thinking about what is going to be guaranteed down the road. In other words, what type of savings can I do and what vehicle can I use that will lead to a guaranteed income or some portion of my income being guaranteed down the road, because people don't tend to think about that. But it becomes, in the income planning process, when I'm sitting down with somebody who's 55, 60, 65 years old, that's the biggest issue that we're looking at. It's the most
important issue. Listen, we have to be able to partition. What do we want guaranteed that might be market neutral? When we come back, we're going to give you our next steps to retirement so that you can implement a simple and straightforward thinking about your golden years.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
You know, living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back to our 4 to Go segment with John Illig, the income architect, and he has huge software that he's developed, and he really, some people that the advisors look to. So when all the professionals in retirement are looking to him and his software, he has one of the leading edge softwares out there that really help us calculate. Now, John, when we're talking about this is the next steps. Our 4 segments, all right, you've talked me into it, you sold me, what do I do now? Let's talk about the first thing. I need to know what a client already has online. I need a good data collector that gives me a good inventory. Talk about a little bit about that asset.
Absolutely. We need to know what current retirement savings they have, obviously, what contributions they're making to any retirement savings account so that we can look at what they're going to have down the road. But from a data collection standpoint as well, it's very important to have a good, what I'll call a projected or an anticipated budget during retirement. We can't completely predict the future. What I typically tell people if they're not yet retired, say 5 years out, is I say, well, pretend you were retired today. What would you be spending money on? Because you know if your mortgage is going to be paid off or it isn't, or et cetera, what cost would you be incurring? And we typically take that in today's dollars, and then we forecast it out with inflation and things of that nature. So that's the information that we need to have from them.
Well, let's say we get the data collector, and remember, you can go ahead and write the show. You know, oneforthemoney.tv, head out to our site and just write me and say, Steve, I need to see this at oneforthemoney.tv. We'll send you a data collector that gives us an idea of what you have.
Sure.
But then we're going to try to extrapolate what would a budget look like. I need to kind of say that, like, for example, I know all my kids will be gone. My insurance premium on my car is going to be going down.
Yeah, absolutely.
My umbrella policies may be reduced.
Right.
I'm going to have different changes. Life events are going to occur.
Absolutely.
So I want to be able to think about what is that budget going to look like. And here's another thing that I noticed that you do in yours. If you can import this now, Social Security, what does that benefit, at least as it is today?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the great things that you can do on the Social Security website, Steve, is you can actually they have a great calculator on there where you can run different scenarios. different scenarios. What might my benefit be in however many years down the road if I keep making the same money I am now, or if that changes, or et cetera. So
Is it easy to use, though,
it's
John?
exceptionally easy
Really?
to use. It's actually kind of fun, to tell you the truth. It's kind of fun to get on there and play. And these different scenarios you can run, you can print them, and it's very easy to do, and we can actually show them how to do it.
Well, actually, that's really huge, because when you think about it, this is a really good boilerplate to go out to the government site on Social Security, run your calculations, see what kind of income you're going to have, and I love the ability to kind of forward forecast. I think I'm going to be making the same amount of money, maybe a little bit more every year, maybe getting a bonus, and I'm going to start putting that into my Social Security. Now, I've noticed a new trend among boomers. People are thinking about working till 70
Very common.
to take their maximum security on Social Security. When the 401k, when you're forced to take distributions by RMDs, or required mandatory distributions. I know those people are starting to move out there and to leave their 401k in the market as long as they can before that date. So even though the boomer may be, like in my age group, we're age 66 is our full retirement on Social Security.
For you and I.
For 4 more years, I think people are saying, forget that. We're going to hold on for 4 more years and take our maximum income. Then we'll have our 401k. It stays in the market a little longer, and people are going to be working longer because we're going to be living longer. Do you see that same trend?
I see it absolutely. Unfortunately, Steve, we see a lot of people waiting until 70 to retire because of what happened to their 401ks, you know, back in 2007, 2008, unfortunately. But it's also because of longevity, because particularly with the baby boomer generation, people like to be active. They like to be doing stuff.
Yeah, when I think about it, we're the most active generation that's ever retired, and I say this with all due respect to all generations that have preceded us. When I look at the numbers of some of the contracts that we look, especially long-term annuities for guaranteed income you can't outlive, things like this, and they're looking at females in our area who they all believe are going to be all hitting their 90s, no problem, going 6, 7 years past whatever the normal mortality tables say. I think we're going to be looking for a lot longer. I mean, medical technology alone.
Oh, absolutely. For that reason, when we do our retirement income forecasts for people, we always run them to at least age 90, and quite often I'm running them to 95, even see what it looks like to age 100, because you know, they may not make it that far, but as I've always said, if you do make it that far, it's a terrible time to be broke. And so we want to be sure we have a plan in there that's going to keep them in the chips for as long as they're around.
And actually, we have calculations that we can help you with this while we're collecting data, while we're actually managing and actually formatting a budget, and then finding out from Social Security, we can actually go ahead and do a mortality run. As we're closing the show, what are your #1 recommendation if you had to summarize everything we just talked about today?
My #1 recommendation would be this: don't procrastinate on this. That is the #1 thing. What we see quite often is people don't think about this retirement budgeting, how they're going to create their income, et cetera, until, I don't know, a month before they're going to give them the gold watch or whatever it might be. The earlier you start this process, I think that it's ideal, particularly with the types of guaranteed products that we have available today to create guaranteed income and all that. The ideal time is about 5 years before you think you're going to retire to get somebody who does what I do to start looking at this for you and forecasting it out. That's the time to strike.
Well, we want you to do that. Just go out to our show's website, oneforthemoney.tv, and we'll send you any of the data collectors or anything you need to be able to get your retirement started. Thanks for being on our show, John, and we're talking about your golden years. Remember, this retirement strategy is simple and straightforward to help you with your money-saving experience. And we've partnered with financial professionals who know the simple and straightforward strategy for your retirement. For more information on how you can simplify saving money for retirement, just go out to the show's website at www.oneforthemoney.tv. And remember, you can follow me on Twitter, visit me on social networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Google+. That's One for the Money.